Theme is about finding a place to belong, finding the place we belong, the place we have longed for. To start, I've asked Anne to read a poem by Gary Soto.
Saturdays at the canal. I was hoping to be happy by 17. School was a sharp check mark in the roll book, an obnoxious tuba playing at noon because our team was going to win at night. The teachers were too close to dying to understand. The hallway stank of poor grades and unwashed hair. Thus, a friend and I sat watching the water on Saturday, neither of us talking much, just warming ourselves by hurling large rocks at the dusty ground, and feeling awful because San Francisco was a postcard on a bedroom wall. We wanted to go there, hitchhike under the last migrating birds, and be with people who knew more than 3 chords on a guitar. We didn't drink or smoke, but our hair was shoulder length, wild when the wind picked up and the shadows of this loneliness gripped loose dirt. By bus or by car, by the sway of a train over a long bridge, we wanted to get out. The years froze as we sat on the bank. Our eyes followed the water, white-tipped, but dark underneath, racing out of town. That's Gary Soto, Saturday at the Canal.
Once upon a time, there was a lovely farm, prosperous, well-kept, in a nice agricultural valley, a bit of an old manor house there, run down, but loved. There was a moat around the house and some bushes near the water, as tends to be the case. And under one of those bushes, there was a nest. A mother duck was sitting on her eggs. Now here we have lovely summer weather. We have prosperity. All the crops are in good order. The hay is stacked. And renewal, eggs, all right, symbolic. New life is coming into the picture. Beware of a story that starts happy. Where can it go? Maybe we're going to have some trouble. Now you know this story, but I'm hoping you will reflect on it personally as a story of a journey, as a story of finding one's own self, finding one's own place. It's not as important what we choose to do in life as to find out what our essence is, find out who we are. Then what you do will follow that if things are in good order. We have water in the story, so there's likely to be that implication of baptism, that purification, the possibility of something new. But right now, a mother duck is sitting on her eggs, and they start to crack. And out pops a beautiful little duck head and goes peep, peep. And the mama leans over and says, quack, quack. Apparently socialization starts early. Got to get the quacking right, okay? And then the next one, and then the next, and they are so cute. And she is so pleased with herself, but you know the story. All but one egg. That last egg, it's always been a little bit larger and a slightly different shade of gray. But anyway, no motion there. The mother's just sitting on the egg and feeling a little sorry for herself. It's lonely to sit on your eggs, and there haven't been many visitors. And then an old friend stops by and asks how things are going. And the mother says, oh, aren't they just beautiful? Oh, yes, they are, of course. Now, what is that egg? Oh, it's a little larger, and it hasn't moved yet. I don't know why it hasn't begun to crack. I don't trust it, the old friend says. Now, she's had her offspring long ago, and she knows a thing or two about a thing or two. She says, you know, once the farmer played a trick on me and put some turkey eggs in my nest, and they hatched, and they were so useless. They're gangly and awkward, and you know they can't swim. I mean, what good is a creature that cannot swim? I would give up on that egg right now. And the mother duck says, well, I've been sitting on it so long, I feel like seeing it through. I'm sorry, I appreciate the advice, but I'm going to stay with it. And she does, and it's not until the next day that the last of the eggs cracks and out pops the most unfortunate little face. Now, the word in Danish is something like ugly, but I have a friend who did her own translation. She said actually the word that Hans Christian Andersen used was disfigured. Was really hideous. Okay, this is not a happy face and not a happy mama, but it says peep peep, and she, out of habit, quack quack, and it gets it. Okay, she's worried. Does she have a turkey on her hands? She'll find out the next day when she takes them all down to the water, which is close, but that's still their first venture out. And he does follow, like all the others, bonded into the mama who pops in the water. The first one jumps in, they submerge for a moment and then pop up and swim away. And all one by one, she's watching him, and he's a little bit off balance and he's a little bit too big, and he jumps in and kind of sinks, and she thinks, is he sinking? And then he pops up and swims around just like all the others. She is relieved. I mean, wouldn't anybody be? Thank goodness my child is not a turkey. Now, we think of these as children's stories, and they are, and maybe we'll get a little bit of attention. I'm not counting on it. But they are stories for all ages. They are the guidance through the transitions of life. Now, it may be a very early transition or two that we hear about in the story, but any transition has similar difficulties. Once I was lost and I saw a policeman and said, do you think we can find my parents? And the policeman says, I don't know, kid. There are so many places they can hide. I only do this to tell jokes, you know. The next outing is to introduce the little ones to the farmyard. They go up to get fed. There's a girl that comes out and throws grain to all the fowl. It's the ducks and the chickens and the turkeys. They're all in one barnyard, and they go up there, and the mother is instructing them, now stand up straight. Now don't step on your own feet. Keep the feet spread. And little ones apparently don't get that automatically, but they're sort of getting it. And the big one, even though he always seems like he's about to tip over, he seems to be able to keep up. And they go into the barnyard, and there's trouble immediately. The little drakes from the other families say, well, who is he? What was he doing here? He's ugly. And they come over and kind of bump him and kind of nip at him and such. And the mother tries to shoo them away. He hasn't done anything to you. Yes, he has. He's funny looking. He deserves a good whooping. And the mother says, doesn't follow the reasoning. But you know, there's only one of her, and there are a lot of other little creatures out there, and they all seem to want to beat up on the ugly duckling, and she really can't protect him. She's not a bad mother. She's what in therapy we call a good enough mother. She's trying. But you know, life is hard, and parents can't protect little ones from everything. And so one night, knowing that it's not working out, knowing that he really doesn't have a home in his home, the little one sneaks off and runs away and never returns again. Now, the unfortunate experiences he's had so far, particularly in the barnyard, helped in a way. They motivated him to have a journey, to see if he could find someplace better. So when we look back on our lives and see that the misfortunes were teachers too, we can, well, not be bitter. I'm not personally planning to send any thank you notes, but we can appreciate that the strangeness of our story may have been necessary, even the parts that hurt. Where does he go? He goes away out into the wasteland. There are areas nearby that aren't farmed. They aren't all tidy. There is no grain available. You just have to do your best. This is the swampland. This is the dark night of the soul, where you're out there exposed. Not alone entirely, but no friends here. There are enemies. There are wild birds that challenge him for being in their area. Finally, they see that he's not really very feisty and he's not going to give them trouble. They make him promise that he won't try to marry into their family. which probably wasn't on his mind. This is the area of the journey and the inner life that Carl Jung called shadow. But he was careful to remind us that gold is found in the shadow, kind of a poetic saying. Something of value, something spiritual, something heartfelt, something creative, something beautiful in the part of ourselves, in the part of our stories that we wish had not existed, that we wish we could eradicate. Out of that will come our most profound depth. No, it doesn't mean it's comfortable. It doesn't mean it's easy. He is not cool. He is awkward, and he is not loved. One day the hunters come out to hunt wild ducks and other wild geese, whatever's out there, and they're pretty good shots, and they're taking down the birds who try to fly away, and he is just terrified. And the hunting dogs go out then and bring back what they've shot. And the big snarling dog, hot with the fever of the hunt, sticks his face through the bush that our little friend is hiding in, right within inches of his face, and then turns and goes and picks up somebody else and goes back. And terrified, he thinks, I am so ugly that the dog would not even kill me. We call this low self-esteem. He's not doing too well. And the rocky part of the story is most of the story. The dark night, we should pluralize it, the dark nights of the soul are many, and the episodes are lengthy. And we think in the middle of them, is life ever going to work again? I'm not sure life ever worked for this guy. Do I have any reason to hope? Well, he hasn't given up on himself. He figures that he can't stay out in the swamplands. This is too dangerous. He saw one night while he was out there a light off in the distance, and he's thinking, that might be a house. Let me see if there's any place for me there. And he travels and travels toward that direction and finds a shanty, a really broken down place. So akimbo that the door is kind of not quite fitting the frame right, which means he's got a little place he can get in there. There is a candle. It is a pretty modest dwelling. There is an old woman just barely getting by with a hen and a tomcat. And they are not very welcoming. Well, the old woman decides he can stay if he can lay eggs, because she quite depends on the hen for her food. Her diet is mostly the eggs that one hen lays. If you lay eggs, you can stay. And the cat is very proud of himself and says, when she strokes me, I purr and throw off sparks sometimes. Can you purr? Can you throw off sparks? And the duckling says, I don't think so. Well, the old woman says, you can't be just a freeloader. Either you learn to purr or lay some eggs, or you have to go. And so he has 3 weeks as a kind of trial period. It doesn't go well at all. They're going on about how they are quite the center of the world, how there's us and the rest, which is us and the rest of humanity as kind of the lesser half of reality. It's interesting that people of very humble means can be quite pompous. The nice thing about egotists is at least they don't talk about other people. And he is not very happy there and longs for the water, which the cat thinks is madness. You actually want to swim voluntarily in water. And he says, yes, in fact, I really need to. And finally, he leaves. I want you to notice in the story how many things do not work out, how many homes do not become homes. We tried things before we got to whatever we figured out in life. One thing about getting older is you know what works for you. You also know what does not work for you. The way you know that is by trying it and finding out, this does not work for me. And fortunately, later in life, you can get closer to what works for you because you've had all the root experiences you could think of. So he's out on his own again, and autumn comes, and winter is going to approach. The leaves turn, it gets quite cold. And then he sees something. He sees some birds flying. Well, it's south, but he doesn't know what's going on. He just sees that they're so beautiful. And they make some sound. They're flying very, very high. They're graceful, but the sound is something he has not heard before. And then he hears himself responding. Involuntarily, a sound come up out of him. And it's strange, but very rewarding. Something very meaningful has happened, and he is completely clueless as to what it is, and they are gone. You know why wild birds fly south? It's way too far to walk. So he's in a little pond. It's getting to be winter. The edges of the pond are becoming iced, and the ice is growing closer and closer to the middle, and he's swimming around in circles trying to keep the ice from forming up around him, which works for a while, but you can't really fight nature. And eventually he is frozen into that pond. And that's it. That's death. In a story of transformation, you will have death and rebirth. You will have death and transfiguration somehow in the story. This is probably that moment. That's not uniquely a religious story. That's one of the most retold ideas. It's about overcoming despair, and we have our share. We have our times of kind of giving up, emotionally dying. Fortunately, that's not supposed to be the end of the story. We get revived. The way it happens in this tale is that a farmer comes by on his way home and notices the poor little creature frozen in the pond and thinks, that's strange, that just doesn't happen. I wonder if he's dead yet. I mean, he might have just, and maybe he knows something, the kind of thing that science knows, which is, you can be frozen for a while and not be totally dead, even if it kind of seems like death has happened. Takes off his wooden shoe, goes over, breaks the ice around the little creature, takes off the rest and sticks it in his coat. Good Samaritan, the kindness of strangers. You are a survivor. You are here. And you get credit for whatever it took you to get here and to accomplish what you have accomplished. And you got help. People who stick around and get somewhere got help. You had a teacher that looked after you, or a neighbor, or somebody who gave you a little advice. Somewhere along the line, there was a farmer who took off his wooden shoe and helped you out. He doesn't even know if he's alive, but he figures the warmth of his body, maybe he'll wake up, and he walks for a while and the little thing starts to stir and he thinks, I got there in time. He's still alive. But he's got a problem now. It's winter and his wife doesn't really like pets. They make a mess because they're kind of inside all the time all winter. He's trying to think of how to save this creature from his wife's wrath. I'll tell her it's a little toy gift, a pet for the kids, to help keep them happy and distracted during the winter, and she kind of frowns, but the kids see the cute little creature and they think this is great. First of all, he's kind of funny looking, which they think is hilarious, and he runs kind of awkwardly, which they love, and they're chasing him around. He has never been around kids, except for the one that threw the grain out back in the barnyard, who actually kicked him because she thought he was funny looking. Anyway, his experience with younger people is not good, so he's starting to run. And he runs and falls into the milk, and the mother is thinking, man, milk all over the place. He runs some more and falls into the butter. Now we have a real mess, and she's thinking, this is not going to work out. He runs some more because the kids are just chasing him, and he's terrified. And he finally falls into the flour. She says, that's it, too much mess, and throws him out. There are some different translations. One is that he just decides to run out on his own. I'm not sure which one is right or matters, but he's back out in the cold today. Okay, we have a hardship story. What's going to happen? Hans Christian Andersen, and this was the story he identified with. This was his favorite. He's clearly the ugly duckling, kind of an awkward guy. He says, I will spare the reader all the suffering our little friend goes through to get through the winter. That's a little literary cheat, if you ask me. He just sort of takes a hop, and we miss some of the darkest parts of the story, but it's been dark enough. Thinking of all the crises of life, the childhood, well, I finally got through my midlife crisis, but now I'm back to just the regular ongoing crisis. These stories illustrate some of it. And as he travels, the sun finally starts to come out. He made it. And he finds his arms moving, well, wings. Hasn't been flying in the story. He's meant to fly, but it's really been foot travel up to now. And involuntarily, his wings begin to lift. And he sees those creatures flying the other direction now, and sort of follows them, but they're flying much faster and much higher. They kind of get away, but he gets a sense of direction. And there's some beautiful countryside now. He sees a place that's almost garden-like, with a lot of pretty trees and things. It mentions apple trees, which are kind of a treat. and there's a beautiful creek, and he sort of lets himself down in the creek, and there's lilac bushes nearby. It's a beautiful Edenic scene, and then he sees them, those magnificent creatures. They're in the stream, a ways down, but he thinks, oh, and they inspire him. That sound that came out of him was the most profound thing that ever happened the first time he saw them, but he doesn't know what it is, and he doesn't know why he's so excited to see them, but he thinks, I'd love to be down near them, but they won't accept me. Nobody has. They'll peck me. They'll peck me to death. Wouldn't a beautiful creature like that just have natural animosity toward me? This would not be a smart move, but I feel something. I feel some sense of meaning. He didn't get that philosophical in the tale, but that's what I'm reading into it, and decides, I'm going to go down there, this is from Hans Christian Andersen, and be near them because it would be worth it. I would rather die near them than live with being pecked at and kicked around and the things that have happened to me and try to get through another winter on my own, what have you. And so he swims down near them and lowers his head, expecting to be attacked. But this is the familiar part of the story, where he sees himself in the reflection of the water. And he doesn't look like the ugly duckling. Maybe he saw a reflection earlier, we don't know, but he sure knows he's ugly, except that's not what he sees. He sees the same shape as those beautiful creatures, who, by the way, do not attack him. They welcome him as one of their own. Now, he's not quite all white yet. There's still a few brown feathers. There's a process there as a cygnet becomes an adult swan, but he has found a place, much to his surprise. And he was quite surprised. Apparently, being born in a duck yard doesn't matter if you emerge from a swan's egg. And the children come down, excited that there's a new one, and they say, oh, he's so pretty, and he's young. Be sure to throw some bread to him. And they call their parents down, and he's quite bashful about all this attention. The swans stroke him with their bills and then bow in welcome. And his thought is, as the sun shines and the lilacs dip their clusters into the water, I never dreamed there would be so much happiness when I was an ugly duckling. So the implication is we don't know ourselves, and in our insecurities and self-criticism, we feel ugly. And somewhere along the line, we find a place where somebody says, oh, you're fine. You're okay. You're one of us. Really? And it's quite exciting. It's like there's a place where I actually fit in, where I belong, and it has beauty. So that's our story, familiar story. You know the story. And I've got some takeaways, quite a few really. First, respect your longings. Pay attention to them. Don't dismiss them as foolish or frivolously. Take them seriously. Try to resist the urge to pull away when it gets uncomfortable. Tolerate that tension. Use it as motivation to follow the thread even when you don't understand it yet. 2, notice what speaks to you. What are the soaring white birds that call you, that stir something in you, that might possibly lead you to your tribe? 3, be patient with the process. Honor the quest. It takes a long time to find ourselves and figure out where we belong. 4, take notes. Writing down what we discover tends to reduce the number of times we have to learn the same lesson. This is the practice part. This is a regular activity. This is not a one and done. This is an ongoing task. Keeping a journal, studying your dreams, some kind of reflective reading on a regular basis really helps. 5, be patient with others. A lot of people we deal with along the way haven't had as much good fortune as we have in figuring out their lives. A lot of people are in more pain than they show. 6, forgive yourself. Compassion towards ourselves is crucial. There are so many ways to criticize our choices, all the things we got wrong, all the lessons that took way too long to learn. Try to let go of these harsh control fantasies. because that's what they are. One of the great advantages is, as I was saying, knowing what does not work for us. That is done by way of mistakes. It's not fair to then criticize ourselves for making the mistakes we needed to learn from. Let's give ourselves some grace for all the experimentation that went awry. Best of luck on the journey.